the one I had worked almost a decade to afford. Marcus was sitting across from me at the kitchen island when he said it. Calm voice, no drama, just facts. If the loan goes into default, Bryn, the bank doesn't chase your mother. They chase you. I felt my stomach drop. You mean the house? I asked. Yes, he said simply. Worst case scenario, yes. That was the first time I opened every financial file connected to my parents. Every transfer, every loan document, every email confirmation. Marcus helped me organize everything into spreadsheets. He's like that, methodical, careful. He treats numbers the way surgeons treat arteries. Nothing sloppy, nothing assumed. We sat there for 3 hours going through records, month by month. October 2019, $1,200 transfer. November, $1,200. December, $1,200. Year after year. 6 full years. Marcus leaned back in his chair slowly. Bryn, he said. Yeah, you've sent your parents $86,400. The number hung in the air like smoke. $86,400. I laughed at first, not because it was funny, because sometimes the brain refuses to accept math. That can't be right, I said. Marcus rotated the laptop toward me. The spreadsheet didn't blink. $86,400. Then he opened the car loan file. $22,000. Total exposure. $108,400. More than the down payment I had put on my penthouse. More than my first 3 years of salary combined. Marcus looked at me carefully. Have you ever seen their mortgage statement? No, not once. I shook my head. They said the payment increased. Marcus tapped the table gently. I'm not saying they lied, he said slowly. But before you keep sending money, you should verify. Verify, such a small word. But something about it made my chest feel tight. Because deep down, somewhere quiet and uncomfortable, I already knew why I had never asked to verify anything. I was afraid of the answer. That weekend, I drove to Cooperton for the first time in almost 2 years. The yellow ranch house looked exactly the same. Same cracked driveway, same white mailbox leaning slightly to the left, same wind chime on the porch. The kind of place that freezes in time while the people inside it quietly change. Donna opened the door like she'd been expecting a delivery, not a daughter. Oh, she said, Bryn, you should have called. I was in the area, I said. That was a lie. Raleigh is 4 hours away. The house smelled like vanilla candles and something fried. Kendra's wedding photos were everywhere now. On the walls, on the mantle, on the refrigerator that still looked like a museum exhibit dedicated entirely to her life. There were new photos of Kendra and Travis holding a baby. My nephew, apparently. I hadn't even known he'd been born. Gerald came in from the garage, wiping his hands on a rag. His hair looked thinner than I remembered. Hey kid, he said quietly. Kid, I was 29 years old and suddenly felt 12 again. We sat at the kitchen table, same chairs, same scratched wood surface where I used to do homework. Donna poured sweet tea like we were having a perfectly normal visit. So, she said brightly, how's the fancy apartment? Penthouse, I corrected gently. Her eyebrows lifted for half a second. I saw the pictures on Instagram, she said. Very impressive. The word impressive sounded less like praise and more like measurement. That's when I understood why the tone of her calls had changed over the last year. The texts, the sudden miss you honey messages, the interest in my life that had appeared out of nowhere. It wasn't love, it was awareness. My success had finally become visible, and visibility changes everything. I wanted to ask about the mortgage, I said calmly. Donna froze for a fraction of a second before taking a sip of tea. What about it? You said the payment went up. Yes, she said quickly. Property taxes. Can I see the statement? The room went quiet. Not dramatic quiet, the slow kind. Gerald stared at the table. Donna set her glass down carefully. Why would you need to see that? She asked. Because I've been paying half of it for 6 years. Her smile tightened. Bryn, honey, are you accusing us of something? That word landed badly. Donna leaned back in her chair. You've changed since moving to Raleigh, she said. I've grown up. She looked at Gerald like she expected him to jump in. He didn't. He just rubbed the back of his neck and stayed quiet like he always had. Donna sighed dramatically. Fine, she said. If it makes you feel better. She walked to the hallway and returned with a folder. Thin, too thin. She slid it across the table. Inside was 1 page, a mortgage summary. Marcus had warned me about this trick. Summaries are easy to manipulate, but even without him, something looked wrong. The balance, the interest rate, the payment amount. I read the numbers twice, then 3 times. Then I looked up slowly. Mom, I said carefully. Yes, the monthly mortgage payment is $930. She blinked, and I held the paper up. I've been sending you $1,200 every month. Donna waved her hand. Dismissively, well, utilities, insurance, repairs for 6 years. She crossed her arms. You're being very ungrateful right now. That word again? Ungrateful. The family's favorite weapon. Gerald finally spoke. Donna, just her name. But it carried something heavy inside it. She ignored him. You act like we owe you explanations, she continued. After everything we did raising you. I looked down at the folder in my lap, then at the envelope inside my bag, the manila envelope Marcus and I had prepared the night before. Inside it were printed bank transfers, loan documents, payment histories, and something else. Something I had discovered 2 weeks earlier while digging through county property records. A document my mother definitely didn't expect me to find. I reached into my bag and placed the envelope gently on the table. Donna frowned. What's that information? I said. Gerald looked nervous suddenly. Donna opened the flap, pulled out the first page, then the second, then the third. Her face slowly lost color, because the last document in the stack wasn't about the mortgage. The yellow ranch house on Pannon Lane had been fully paid off 9 years ago. The one I had worked almost a decade to afford. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. That's not true, I said quietly. I figured, Uncle Frank replied. His voice always sounded like it had been dragged across gravel. Listen, I'm not calling to stir trouble, but there's some things you should probably know. My chest tightened a little. About what? About where that money might be going. I didn't speak for a second. Marcus looked up from the table across the room when he saw my face change. What do you mean? I asked. Frank let out a slow breath. Your sister and Travis, they've been struggling longer than people say. How long? Since before the wedding. That didn't make sense. Kendra's wedding photos online had looked like a magazine spread. Huge venue, live band, designer dress. Struggling how? I asked. Frank paused like he was deciding how much truth to drop at once. Credit cards, he said finally. A lot of them. Travis tried a construction business that didn't work out. Then there were loans. Then more loans to cover the first ones. I felt something cold move through my stomach. And Mom, I asked slowly. Another pause. Your mother stepped in, Frank said. Or at least, she said she would. Stepped in how? Well, he said. She told the family she was helping them stay afloat. Said she was taking care of things until Travis got back on his feet. My fingers tightened around the phone. With my money, I said quietly. Frank didn't answer directly, but silence sometimes says more than words. But I know Kendra and Travis moved into a new house last year. Bigger place out near Lake Briar. My brain tried to process that. A new house. Yeah, while I've been paying Mom $1,200 a month to save the old one. Frank exhaled slowly again. That's why I called, he said. Something about the story never sat right with me. I closed my eyes. For 6 years I had imagined my money keeping that yellow ranch house safe, keeping Gerald comfortable, keeping the roof over the family steady. But now another picture was forming, my transfers becoming someone else's down payment, my generosity becoming my sister's safety net. Frank spoke again. "You need to talk to your dad," he said. "Not your mom, your dad." "I've tried," I told him. "He never calls back." "Try again," Frank said, "and don't call the house phone." The line went quiet for a second. Then he added something that made my heart skip. "Your mother answers that phone before it even finishes ringing." After we hung up, Marcus watched me carefully. "That sounded serious," he said. I told him everything, Frank said. The credit cards, the failed business, the new house by the lake. Marcus didn't interrupt, he just listened. When I finished, he folded his hands on the table. "So," he said slowly, "your money may have been covering someone else's lifestyle." I nodded once, and, he continued, "your mother kept you on the hook with the co-signed car loan, the leash." That word came back to my mind again. Marcus tapped the stack of documents beside his laptop. "Bryn, legally speaking, you have two separate issues here. Okay, one is financial deception, and the other, the loan. Attached to your credit." I looked down at the papers, bank transfers, loan agreements, property records, evidence, real evidence. Marcus slid a manila envelope across the table. "I printed everything," he said. I ran my fingers along the edge of the envelope. It felt heavier than paper should feel. "What are you planning to do?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked over to the windows of my penthouse, 14 floors up. Raleigh stretched out below me, glass towers, traffic lights, tiny headlights moving through the streets. 7 years earlier, I had sat alone in a Civic with my diploma in the trunk. No celebration, no celebration. Just a text message that said my sister needed them more. Now I owned this place. Every inch of it earned, every payment mine. And suddenly I understood something clearly. My mother had spent years deciding who mattered more. Now it was my turn to decide something too. I turned back toward Marcus. "I'm not cutting them off," I said. He raised an eyebrow slightly. "You're not?" "No." I held up the envelope. "I'm finishing the conversation." 2 months later, my mother texted me out of nowhere. "Dinner Sunday. Haven't seen you in ages." There was a little heart emoji at the end. 7 years ago. That message would have made me hopeful. Now it made me curious, because 2 days earlier, I had posted a single photo on Instagram, the view from my penthouse balcony at sunset glass railing, city skyline. A caption that simply said, "Grateful for the life I built." The photo had gotten a lot of attention, including, apparently, Donna Myers. I replied to the text with one word, "Sure." Sunday evening, I drove the 4 hours back to Cooperton. Again, same driveway, same yellow house, same wind chime. But this time, I didn't come empty, handed. In the passenger seat beside me was the manila envelope Marcus had prepared. Inside it were 6 years of transfers, property records, proving the house was paid off, car loan documents with my name on them, and one more document. Marcus insisted we include a repayment agreement. $86,400, 6 years of mortgage help. The front door opened before I knocked. "Darling," she said warmly. "Come in." The dining table was already set. Kendra and Travis were there. Gerald sat at the end of the table. Quiet as always. Everyone looked comfortable, relaxed, like they were expecting a pleasant family dinner. I sat down slowly and placed the manila envelope on the table beside my plate. Donna noticed it immediately. She asked lightly. I met her eyes across the table. "Just some paperwork," I said calmly. She smiled again, but something in her expression flickered for half a second, because mothers like Donna have very sharp instincts, and somewhere deep down, she could probably already feel that this dinner wasn't going to end the way she planned. The one who moved away and forgot where she came from. The one who didn't call when her father was sick. The one who refused to help when the family needed her. That was the version of me sitting at the table. That night, Donna had spent 7 years building that character. Now she wanted me to play the role. I felt Marcus's hand tighten gently on my knee under the table. Not pushing, not warning. Just there. I looked around the room slowly. Aunt Ruth, Uncle Dennis, Natalie, neighbors, who had watched me grow up. And at the far end of the table, Gerald, my father, finally lifted his eyes. For a moment it felt like we were the only 2 people in the room. There was something there I had seen once before. The same thing. I noticed the day I left after graduation. Guilt. Donna cleared her throat lightly. "Well, honey," she said sweetly. "Don't be shy." The room waited. I stood up slowly. My chair scraped softly against the floor. For a second I didn't speak. I just rested my hand on the back of the chair and looked around the table again. "You're right," I said calmly. Donna's smile widened. Immediately, family does help family. A few people nodded. Kendra sniffed loudly into her napkin. I reached down and picked up my bag from the floor beside my chair. Then I placed the manila envelope gently on the table in front of me. Donna's smile flickered, just for a second. "What's that?" she asked lightly. "Something I brought to share," I said. I slid the envelope open and removed the first sheet. Bank statements. Rows and rows of transfers. "Some of you may not know this," I began, keeping my voice even, "but for the last 6 years I've been sending my parents $1,200 every month." A small ripple of surprise moved through the room. Donna laughed softly, like I had just told a cute story. "Oh, Bryn, honey, you don't have to embarrass us. It adds up to $86,400. The room went quiet again, the kind of quiet where forks stop moving and chairs stop creaking. I placed the bank statement page in the center of the table. Uncle Dennis leaned forward to look at it. Donna's smile was gone now. "That money," I continued, "was for the mortgage on this house." Several people nodded automatically. They'd heard that story many times. Donna folded her arms slowly. "Yes," she said coolly. "And we've always appreciated." I placed the second document on top of the first. County, property records, stamped, dated, public information. "The mortgage on this house," I said quietly, "was fully paid off in March 2019. A few seconds passed before the meaning landed. Then the murmurs started. "What? Paid off? 2019? Uncle Dennis picked up the paper and squinted at it. "That's a county record," he said. "Mortgage satisfied." I nodded once. I started sending money 7 months after the house was already paid off. 23 faces turned slowly toward Donna. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You're twisting things," she said sharply. "No," I replied. "I'm organizing them." I pulled another sheet from the envelope. The timeline Marcus and I had built. 6 years of transfers. One column labeled Purpose stated mortgage help. The other labeled actual mortgage status, paid in full. Numbers don't argue, they just sit there. Natalie leaned forward and read the page carefully. Then she looked up at her aunt, Aunt Donna. "Is this real?" Donna straightened her shoulders. "You people don't understand the pressure I've been under," she snapped. Helping Kendra, helping Gerald, my father finally spoke. His voice was quiet but clear. "Donna," the entire table froze. Gerald almost never interrupted her. He set his glass down slowly. "Did you tell Bryn the house was paid off?" he asked. Donna's jaw tightened. "That's not the point right now." "It's exactly the point," he said. Silence filled the room again. I pulled one more item from the envelope. The cream-colored cardstock. Invitation, 7 years old now. The edges slightly worn. I placed it gently beside the other papers. "My graduation invitation," I said. Aunt Ruth picked it up and read the inside. Her eyebrows lifted. Row 7. Seats 4 and 5, saved for you. Donna looked irritated now. What does that have to do with anything? She said. It has to do with the story everyone here has been told about me. I looked around the table again. I was told many of you believe I stopped calling, that I ignored my father when he was sick, that I refused to help this family. Several people shifted uncomfortably. Natalie looked down at the table. Uncle Dennis scratched his beard. That's what we heard. Aunt Ruth admitted quietly. I nodded slowly. I didn't know my dad was in the hospital. All eyes turned toward Donna again. She laughed sharply. Oh, please. You moved away and forgot about us. I called Dad last Thanksgiving, I said. It went to voicemail. Gerald looked up quickly. You called, yes. He stared at Donna. I never got that message. The room went very still, the kind of stillness where truth finally has enough space to stand up. I rested my hand on the envelope. I didn't come tonight to fight, I said calmly, and I didn't come to humiliate anyone. Donna let out. A bitter laugh could have fooled me. I came because my name has been used to tell a story that isn't true. I looked at Kendra then, and because apparently I've already agreed to pay for something else tonight. Kendra's face flushed red. That's not what Mom meant, she muttered. I slid the final document across the table, the repayment agreement Marcus had drafted, $86,400, a simple payment schedule, no threats, just numbers. I'm not funding anyone else's life. No one clapped this time. No one spoke at all. Because for the first time in that house, the story my mother had been telling for 7 years had just collapsed in front of everyone. And now this was my moment to show that I still had a heart. Donna rested her hand on my shoulder, soft but steady. The pressure was exact. You'll do the right thing, won't you, baby? I looked around the table. Aunt Ruth, Uncle Dennis, the neighbors from church, Gerald standing in the kitchen doorway, staring down at the floor. Then my eyes moved to Marcus. He looked calm. His eyes said everything his mouth didn't need to. You already have what you need. I stood up slowly. Donna's face lit up. Kendra gripped her napkin. Travis sat straighter in his chair. They all believed I was about to say the words they expected. Something like, of course, anything for family. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out a manila envelope. I opened it slowly, taking my time. No hurry. I slid out 2 sheets of paper and held them beside me. Before I say anything, I said, I want everyone here to understand something. My voice stayed steady. I had practiced that part in front of the mirror, not the speech itself, just the breathing. For 6 years, I continued. I have been sending $1,200 every month to Mom and Dad. She told me the money was for the mortgage on this house. I looked directly at Donna. Her smile was still there, but it had stiffened, like it had been frozen in place. According to the public county records for certain, Georgia, this house has been completely paid off since March of 2019. I handed the first page to Uncle Frank, who was sitting closest to me. It was a copy of the property deed record. He adjusted his reading glasses, looked it over, and gave a slow nod. That adds up to $86,400 over 6 years, I went on. I don't know exactly where every dollar went, but I do know, and now all of you know that it did not go to this house. The room became completely silent, the kind of silence where you can hear someone swallow. Aunt Ruth turned toward Donna. Uncle Dennis slowly lowered his fork. One of the church neighbors looked over at her husband, and a smile finally disappeared. Bryn, this isn't the moment for this. You chose the moment, Mom, I said calmly. You invited everyone here. You told them I offered to bankroll Kendra. That wasn't true. So now they can hear the real story. I lifted the second sheet of paper. It showed a simple timeline. Dates, dollar amounts. The purpose I had been told, and the actual mortgage status. Clean columns. No comments. Just numbers. I printed copies for anyone who wants to see them, I said. I'm not asking anyone to take sides. I'm only asking you to look at the numbers. I placed both papers on the table and sat down again. Uncle Frank stood up first. His chair scraped back hard enough to tap the wall. Donna, is this correct? His voice was flat and heavy. Gerald told me himself the mortgage was finished. I asked you about it last month and you hung up on me. Gerald didn't move. His eyes stayed on the floor, but he didn't argue. Either Aunt Ruth picked up the timeline page. She read it slowly. When she finished, she set it down and looked at Donna in a way that people look at someone they suddenly realize they don't really know. Donna, where did that girl's money go? Donna's hands were shaking now. This is a family matter. You invited us, Natalie said sharply from across the room. You asked us to come watch her say yes. You can't suddenly call it private when she says no. Two of the neighbors from church quietly exchanged looks and began picking up their coats. Donna turned toward Kendra, searching for support, some kind of lifeline. But Kendra wouldn't even look at her. She was staring at the timeline on the table, lips pressed tight together, clearly doing math she had never bothered to do before. Travis stood up without saying a word and walked out the front door. The screen door slammed behind him. Nobody tried to stop him. Nobody even called his name. Donna slowly dropped back into her chair. For the first time in this entire situation, she had no prepared line, no quick pivot, no tears ready to appear. Uncle Frank lifted the property deed and held it so the whole room could see it. You told the entire family this girl abandoned you, he said. You told Ruth she hung up on you when Gerald was in the hospital. He shook his head slowly. From where I'm standing, it looks like the opposite happened. Donna opened her mouth. Nothing came out. But I still wasn't finished. I know that moment was heavy. Honestly, standing there in that living room, my hands were freezing cold. But I wasn't shaking because I was scared. I was shaking because I felt relief. For the first time in 7 years, the truth was out in the open, and it wasn't only mine to carry anymore. Let me ask you something. If you were standing where I was at that exact moment, would you let Uncle Frank keep talking? Or would you simply walk out the door? Think about it. I'd honestly like to know what you would do. But the story didn't end there, not even close. Because even I didn't expect what happened next. I reached into my bag again and pulled out a folded index card. It wasn't a long speech, just 5 sentences I had written at my kitchen counter the night before while Marcus read over my shoulder. I unfolded the card and read from it. Starting today, the monthly transfers stop. They've already been canceled. Donna flinched. I've also refinanced the car loan, so it is only in my name. Mom, your name is no longer on the title. The payments are my responsibility now. Donna's mouth opened and closed again. The control she had been holding for years had suddenly disappeared. I will not keep paying for other people's lifestyles while being called the daughter who abandoned her family. The room was so quiet I could hear the ice shifting in someone's glass of sweet tea. If Kendra needs help, I continued, I suggest she consider the same options I used: scholarships, part-time work, and learning how to budget. I looked up from the card. I looked at Donna, then Gerald, then Kendra, then the banner hanging on the wall that said, "Family First." I love this family, I said, but loving people doesn't mean I have to burn myself just to keep someone else warm. I folded the card and slipped it back into my pocket. Aunt Ruth gave a small nod. Natalie wiped tears from her eyes. Uncle Dennis, who only 20 minutes earlier had told me I should help my sister, stared down at his hands. Nobody argued. Nobody told me I was wrong. And for the first time in my entire life, nobody said I was making everything about myself. Donna looked at Gerald. Gerald looked down at the floor. Then he did something he hadn't done all evening. He lifted his head and looked up. Not at Donna, at me. But before anything else could happen, Uncle Frank cleared his throat. There's something more, he said. The whole room seemed to hold its breath. Frank stood in the middle of the room with his hands in his pockets, looking at Gerald the way a brother looks at another brother he is finally done protecting. 7 years ago, Frank said slowly, your dad drove to your graduation. I stopped breathing. I know because I lent him my truck, Frank continued. His car wouldn't start that morning. He came to my house at 6 a.m. asking for the keys. He told me, Frank, I'm not missing this. Everyone turned toward Gerald. He was leaning against the kitchen doorway with his eyes closed. He drove for hours, Frank said. Got there early and sat in the back row. I know because he called me afterward from the parking lot and told me he saw you walk across that stage. My chest felt like it cracked open. Something between sadness and gratitude spread right through me. Then Donna called him, Frank said, his voice turning hard. She told him Kendra had fainted at the engagement party and he needed to come back immediately. Frank looked directly at Donna. He left right away. I found out 2 weeks later that Kendra never fainted. It was a lie just to get him out of that auditorium. Gerald opened his eyes. Tears ran down both sides of his face. I had never seen that kind of emotion from my father in my entire adult life. Donna stood up quickly. That's not it is true, Donna. Gerald's voice broke across the room like glass shattering. Stop. Just one word. The first word he had spoken all evening, and it wasn't aimed at me. It was aimed at her. I gripped the edge of the table. My father had been there. He had watched me graduate, and my mother had pulled him away with a lie. I should have stayed, baby girl, Gerald whispered. I should have stayed. The room was still trying to process everything. People were whispering. Then Natalie stood up from the far end of the table. Since we're telling the truth tonight, she said calmly, there's one more thing Aunt Donna didn't mention. Everyone turned toward her. Natalie didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She carried the same calm strength as her father. 3 months ago, Travis Hadley was arrested for driving under the influence. She paused briefly. He was processed through the county clerk's office. I know because I handled the paperwork. The silence that followed felt different this time. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about trust. Kendra turned slowly toward Donna, her face completely pale. What? Inside and was standing near the door. His face turned bright red. Kendra stood up. You were arrested 3 months ago. Travis said nothing. Kendra turned toward Donna again. You knew? You bailed him out and didn't tell me. Donna raised both hands. I was protecting this family. No, Donna, Uncle Frank said firmly. You were protecting an image. That's not the same thing. Donna sank back down into her chair. The banner above her head still said family first, but now it looked more like a caption for a lie. For the first time I could remember, my mother had no response, no tears, no excuses, no speech about everything she had done for everyone. Raunt of everyone. Asterisk his truck slowly rolled out of the driveway, while Aunt Ruth was still in the middle of speaking. 3 of the church neighbors quietly slipped away without saying anything. One of them, Mrs. Gentry, who had known our family for nearly 20 years, paused beside me on the porch. She leaned closer and said softly, You did the right thing, hun. Inside the house, Donna was still sitting at the head of the table. The cobbler had gone cold. The sweet tea had turned watery from melted ice. The banner above her still read, Family First in handmade letters, and she sat under it like a queen in an empty courtroom. But nobody was clapping anymore. Sunday morning, Marcus and I were loading the car outside Uncle Frank's house, where we had stayed overnight. The sun had barely risen. The air smelled like red clay and pine trees. He didn't have the truck. He had walked over from Frank's kitchen, holding a cup of coffee, wearing the same flannel shirt from the night before. He sat down on the porch step. I sat beside him. Marcus, quietly went inside the house without needing to be asked. For a full minute, we just sat there in silence. Gerald held his coffee cup with both hands like it was the only warm thing left in the world. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he finally said. "I waited. I was at your graduation," he continued. "I watched you walk across that stage. He swallowed hard. You looked proud. And I left. I left because your mother said," he stopped and shook his head. "No, I left because I was a coward. I didn't argue with him. He wasn't wrong. I knew about the money," he said after a moment. "Not all of it, but enough. Donna would mention things. She'd say, 'Bryn's helping out,' or 'Bryn sent extra this month.' I never asked where it went." He looked down at his cup. "I should have." "Yeah," I said quietly. "You should have." He nodded slowly. No excuses. No attempts to defend himself. Just a man sitting there with the full weight of what he had failed to do. I looked down the street at the tall pine trees, at the mailbox he used to repaint every spring. "If you want to talk," I said, "call me on Tuesdays, just you, not." Through Mom, he looked at me. His eyes were red but steady. "Tuesdays," he repeated. "Your voice, not hers. That's where we start." He reached over and squeezed my hand once. Quick and rough. The way a man does when he doesn't trust himself to show more than that. That was the beginning. I was just closing the trunk when Kendra appeared at the end of the driveway. Her eyes were swollen. No makeup, her hair pulled back. The way she used to wear it when we were teenagers. She looked smaller somehow. "Did you know Mom bailed Travis out and didn't tell me?" she asked. Her voice sounded raw. "No," I said. "I found out the same time you did." 3 months, she whispered, shaking her head. 3 months she kept that from me. In my own house. I leaned against the car and let her talk. "I didn't know the house was already paid off either, Bryn," she said. "She told me you offered the money. She said you wanted to help. She said it was your idea, and you never asked me directly." I replied. Kendra flinched, then slowly nodded. Double quotes. "No, I didn't. She told me you didn't need help," she said quietly. "She told you I volunteered. She told the family I disappeared." I crossed my arms. Everyone got a different story. That's how she kept the whole thing going. Kendra stared at the ground for a long time. When she looked up again, her eyes were wet but focused. "What do I do now?" "That's not my question to answer, Kendra," I said. "But if I were you, I'd start by looking at your own bank statements." She pressed her lips together and nodded slowly. I opened the car door, then paused. "Hate you," I said. "You need to hear that." She didn't answer right away. Then she said quietly, "I wouldn't blame you if you did." I got into the car. Marcus was already sitting in the passenger seat, pretending to scroll through his phone. He's very good at knowing when to disappear. I started the engine and pulled out of the driveway in the rearview mirror. Kendra was still standing there, her arms wrapped around herself, watching the car leave. 2 weeks after that dinner, a few things changed. Donna deleted the photo of the Family First banner from Facebook. Then she removed her profile picture completely. For the first time in almost 10 years, her page went quiet. No posts, no albums, no carefully arranged photos showing the perfect Southern family. Gerald called me the following Tuesday. The call lasted 8 minutes, mostly silence. He talked about a carburetor he rebuilt at the shop. I told him about a project I was working on at my job. We didn't mention Donna. We didn't have to. The call itself mattered more than the words. The next Tuesday he called again. 12 minutes that time. He asked about Marcus. Kendra texted me 3 weeks later. I filed for divorce. No explanation needed. Later I found out she had discovered credit card statements Travis had hidden. Online gambling losses totaling $47,000. The DUI had only been the crack in the wall. Uncle Frank eventually arranged what he called a real family dinner. No banners, No speeches, just Frank, Gerald, Natalie, Aunt Ruth, and me. Joining through a video call, we ate, talked, and laughed a little. Nobody performed for anyone else. Donna texted me 3 times during those weeks. I didn't block her, but I didn't respond either. Her last message said, "I did what I thought was best for this family." I read it while sitting on my balcony. Raleigh stretched out below me. Marcus brought 2 cups of coffee and sat down in the chair next to mine. "You going to reply?" he asked. "When she's ready to acknowledge something," I said.
What?
"Explain." He nodded. 14 floors above the street, the city hummed with quiet energy. My mortgage was secure. My credit score was climbing back up. Belonged, my bank balance grew by $1,200 each month. But the real thing I got back wasn't money. It was quieter than that. It was the sound of my own name finally spoken by people who knew the truth. Sometimes people ask me about the penthouse. They see the photo of the skyline, the balcony, the sunlight pouring through the windows, and they assume that's the point of the whole story. It isn't. I didn't buy the penthouse to prove anything to anyone. I bought it because after 7 years of overnight shifts, tiny studio apartments, frozen vegetables for dinner, and automatic transfers to a house that didn't need my money, I wanted one thing that belonged completely to me, a place where, when I turned the key in the door, I knew no one else had paid for it. No one else's name was on the deed. No one else could take it away. The word I wrote under that photo home wasn't meant to show off. It was the first time I used that word and truly meant it. Home wasn't Pan Lane anymore. Home was a place I built myself. Brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck, while my family looked the other way. Last week I was unpacking the final box from my closet at the bottom. Under a pile of old phone chargers and college notebooks, I found the graduation invitation again. Cream. Colored cardstock. Gold lettering. Inside. My own handwriting. Row 7, seats 4 and 5, saved for you. I stood in my living room holding it. 14 floors of city lights, shining through the windows, and I realized something surprising. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't angry either. I was simply done carrying it. I placed the invitation on the bookshelf, beside a photo of Marcus and me at a friend's wedding and a postcard Uncle Frank had mailed me last summer, not to remember the pain, but to remember how far I had traveled. The penthouse sits 14 floors above the street. But the journey that brought me here really started years ago, in a parking lot where I stood alone with a diploma in my hand and nowhere to go. So where does everything stand now? Gerald and I talk every Tuesday. The calls are getting longer. 15 minutes last week, he told me he's been going to the diner on Main Street by himself. That might not sound like a big deal, but for a man who spent 30 years orbiting Donna's schedule, it's a quiet revolution. He isn't perfect. He spent 7 years watching and staying silent. But he's trying, and trying matters, as long as it stays consistent. Kendra reached out a month after the dinner. One message: I started therapy. I replied, "That's good." Short, just honest. I'm not ready to rebuild my relationship with Kendra yet. She accepted that money for years and never once asked where it came from. She isn't the villain of this story, but she isn't innocent either. We'll see what happens over time. The door isn't locked, but it isn't wide open either. Marcus and I are steady, strong. He doesn't bring up the dinner unless I mention it first. Some nights we sit on the balcony together and say absolutely nothing. Those are my favorite evenings. And Donna, she still hasn't reached out in a way that feels real. Her texts are wrapped in explanations and justifications. I was trying to keep this family together. You don't know the pressure I was under. None of them begin with the words "I was wrong." I'm not waiting for a perfect apology. I know she may never give one, but the minimum requirement is acknowledgement, not explanation, not deflection, not rewriting the story, just the truth. I lied and it hurt you until that moment happens. The door stays exactly where it is. Boundaries don't require someone else's approval. They only require your own. I learned that at 29, sitting in a living room full of people who finally heard the truth. Better late than empty. I'm not sharing this story so people will hate my mother. I'm sharing it because somewhere out there, someone might be listening to this in their car, or through headphones, or lying awake in bed at midnight. Maybe they are sending money every month to someone who promised it was for one thing. But the truth is, it's going somewhere else, maybe. They get phone calls that begin with family helps family, and end with guilt. Maybe they are being told they are selfish, just for asking where their own paycheck goes. If that's you, here is what I want you to understand. Asterisk, you've always been enough. The person who can't see it, that's their blindness, not your failure. Loving your family doesn't mean letting them consume you. You can love someone deeply and still say enough. Those two things don't cancel each other out. They never did. If the day comes when you draw that line and they call you ungrateful, selfish, or cold, remember this: selfish people rarely lie awake, worrying about being selfish. The fact that it keeps you up at night proves you're not what they say. I used to think strength was enduring everything, taking the blows, and getting back up. There's a kind of power in that, sure. But there's another kind. The kind where you step out of the ring completely. That's where I am now. Not fighting, not running, just standing in a home I built, with my name on the door, drinking coffee. On a balcony 14 floors above a city that doesn't know my story. The empty chair at my graduation used to be the saddest thing I owned. Now it's just a chapter. And that chapter has a different ending than the one my mother wrote for me. 7 years ago, my mother texted, "You understand, right?" For a long time, I thought I did. I thought it meant accepting, absorbing, making room for other people's choices, and calling it grace. I don't think that anymore. Today, if she asked again, I'd say, "Yes, Mom, I understand now. I understand that I deserved better, and I finally gave it to myself." My diploma hangs in my home office now, next to a photo of Marcus and me at his sister's cookout. A framed postcard from Uncle Frank that says, "Proud of you, kid," in his handwriting, and my first marathon finisher's medal from the Raleigh Half Marathon 2 years ago. I cried at that finish line not because it hurt, but because nobody had to carry me. On Tuesday nights, my phone rings. Gerald's name pops up. "I always pick up last week," he said. "I told my buddy at the shop about your penthouse." He said, "Your girl did all that on her own," and I said, "Yeah, she did." I pressed my lips together so he wouldn't hear me smile. That was enough for now. This isn't a fairy tale. It isn't a full reconciliation. Some things don't come back completely, and I've made peace with that. But I can tell you what I have. I have a home. I have a man who reads bank statements for fun and never once tells me how to feel. I have a father who's learning to call. I have a bookshelf with a 7-year-old graduation invitation on it, and a view of the city I chose for myself. I have my name back. If this story resonated with you, I'm glad. If you just listened for the drama, that's fine too. Either way, thank you for staying. Thank you for staying until the end. That means something to me. If you've ever had to set a boundary with someone you love, even when it cost you, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. I read every single one. Hit like if this one made you think. And if you want more, there's another story waiting for you in the description below. Same kind of family drama, but with a twist you won't see coming. I didn't either. Take care of yourselves, and remember, your name belongs to you. Nobody else gets to rewrite it.